Krista Gorman thought she was about to give birth to her first child, but in the middle of labor, she died. And what she experienced in those moments didn't just bring her back, it changed the way she sees life forever. In this conversation, we're diving into what she saw, what she felt, and how coming back reshaped everything from fear to purpose to the way she lives each day now. If you've ever wondered what happens when we die, Krista had an experience that she wasn't meant to keep to herself. When she chose to come back, she was told to share what she had learned. And Krista, I'm so grateful that you decided to share with us and the listeners. Welcome to Meant to Be Heard.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
I find your story so interesting, so captivating. I gave birth to my daughter almost 2 years ago now, and so I just found a lot of resonance in your birth story, and so I'm so excited to get into it. I'm hoping that we can start just before the NDE. So you're pregnant with your first child, you're married, you just finished school to become a physician's assistant, a PA. Walk us through what life was like pre-near-death experience.
Okay. So I had just graduated from my PA training program 3 weeks before I was due to be induced. My daughter had an issue with her kidney, and they felt that it was a good idea to induce labor a week early, just to take her and have her evaluated quickly, just to be sure that that kidney was functioning okay. And I had reluctantly agreed to the induction. I felt a little hesitancy around it because I knew that inductions often led to C-sections and especially in first time pregnant mothers. And I really wanted to deliver her myself. But at the same time, I felt like I needed to listen to my doctors and follow their recommendation, which I did. And so I went in for the induction on a Sunday evening, and it was summertime in Florida. And I labored through the night. It's not natural. So the labor itself isn't natural. So I didn't progress very, very much over the course of about 15 hours. So they decided she showed just one instance of distress. And I knew from my training that that would mean that I'd be going in for an emergency C-section. It's like it happens very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just devastated. Like I so wanted to deliver her. And I had asked for an epidural because with the induction of labor, they give you a medication that causes abnormally strong contractions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a lot of pain. I had gone through the night fine, but by that point, I was like, they were becoming more intense, and I was in a lot of pain. So they gave me an epidural, and then that's when Maggie had a little bit after that, Maggie had some distress, and then they were putting in an internal monitor on Maggie. And what that is it's a metal corkscrew. Literally, I put them on infants myself that they screw into the skin of the scalp. And yeah,
It
we were,
actually punctures through?
yes, we were trained
Whoa.
that that the baby doesn't feel it. There's not a lot of nerve endings there, blah, blah, blah. So that was my belief. At the same time, I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I'd have to see it for myself,
Right.
That's how I was trained. So when the nurse midwife was doing this, Maggie must have reflex. She must have felt it, and she kicked really hard. But I didn't feel it because I had an epidural. But when that happened, she pushed amniotic fluid into my bloodstream, and my body saw it as foreign and started to form these little microclots around the amniotic fluid very quickly. I mean, your body's moving your blood through your body so quickly. So this happened really fast. And as the blood circulated back to my lungs, it started to block off the lung vasculature, and I started having trouble breathing. And again, this happened very rapidly. I'm talking split second, and then it all progressed. And within seconds, I was being wheeled out of that room and across the hallway into the OR. So in
Okay.
this period of time where they pulled me on my side, put oxygen on my face, I heard code blue as I was going out of the door, because my vital signs must have been just plummeting. And I was in the hallway on my side, and I remember trying to suck air in, and it was like sucking through a teeny tiny straw, and I couldn't get any more. So at that point, my vision just faded, but I felt this peace sort of enveloped me from behind my head, behind and over my head. It sort of started to come around, just this sense of peace. And my next moment of awareness was of being high above what was my body below, but I didn't know that it was my body.
Oh, wow. So you're looking down at the scene, but you don't have a connection to the body that you're looking at?
Correct.
Interesting.
I didn't have any labels for anything. I didn't know what anything was, but I could see, and I saw the body there, and I watched these little black dots, I call them like little particles, come racing up to where my vision was and sort of surrounded me like this very loose, static, undulating kind of cloud, like
Okay.
an energy cloud.
Would you say that that was all around your
My
energy body
vision.
or your vision? Okay, so your vision becomes all
Yeah.
these little black particles. The movie that you're looking at that you're not quite sure really what it is that you're looking at
Yeah.
becomes okay, that's interesting.
That's the scene. So
Okay.
I'm like beyond the ceiling, kind of far away, but close at the same time. And I saw that happen, and I saw a person come to, and I didn't know it was a person, it was a man. He came into like the doorway and paused for a second and then stepped up to the edge of the bed. And there was another doctor on the other side, and he had like a blue drape like towel. And just before he stepped up, he handed what was in the towel to someone at my right shoulder. And she took it and turned around, and again, I didn't know that this was a man, woman, nothing. I had no idea of what this was that I was watching. But I was curious. I felt this curiosity, and I was like, "Oh, what was that? Like I want to know what that was." And I floated around to the other side of the body, and there was a man on this side, on the left side of me, and he was like doing this, and I had a catheter in my chest, so he was threading this catheter, Swansgan's catheter, into my pulmonary circulation. So it's when cardiac arrest happens, that's what you do. It's like one of the monitoring tools.
Okay.
And I was feeling more curiosity about what was going on. And as that feeling grew, I felt this tug to my left,
Uh-huh.
like something wanted me to go that way. And I was curious, and it was like one of those things where you know the word, but it just won't come. It's like it's right there, like the tip of the tongue. It was like that. Like I know what this is, but I can't put my finger on it.
While
And
you're seeing this scene, like you're like, this
yeah,
is so familiar. I'm so curious, but like who is this? What's going on here?
yeah, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I was like, it was like watching a movie. So it pulled harder the second time, and I just relaxed. I was like, okay. And as soon as I relaxed, I started moving, and I moved through the wall and into this bright white flash of a space. It was like a flash of white, but it was like a space. And then through that, and through like an opening in the white space, into this other space that was particles like I like merged with it, and I was moving like imperceptibly fast. And so I'm moving along, and I look to my left and I see the dense particles, and then a little bit of it became like fluid for a second. And it was sort of like fluid gray, whitish, black. And then it became like the dense particles again. And I turned back and faced forward. And then all of a sudden I just stopped, and this funnel of information just came like a and it came to one point in front of me. And it was as if I had all of the questions I'd ever had in my life answered like instantaneously. And the answer for absolutely everything was love. So I felt that love. I felt permeated with it. It was like all encompassing. And it was beyond the space I was in, and I was it, and I was beyond the space. I was infinite, and I was completely euphoric. Like it's so hard to put human words to it.
I was going to say you're doing such a good job, but I
Thank
can
you.
just tell that it's probably so hard to describe what you saw, what you felt, and to put it to words that people can try and visualize or try and relate if they haven't gone through something similar.
Yes, to put that feeling into human words so that someone else can fully understand your experience is next to impossible.
Yeah, right.
And so it's just just experiencing it. It's like just once you have experience, you don't need proof or faith or anything.
Yeah,
You
it's annoying
know.
at that point.
Yeah. So for me, like having this experience, I had never considered really a near death experience, like, or what it's like to die and come back. Like it wasn't on my radar.
Mhm.
And so this whole thing was like phenomenally amazing and perfect. And there was nothing, no fear at all, nothing but love, curiosity, interest, compassion, like feelings. And so that's where I found that my experience is a little bit different than others that I've heard, and people that I know, friends that I have that have had experiences or NDEs. And mine, because mine was all feeling. Like there was no telepathy, there was no thinking,
Mm.
there was no communication in human words. It was all feeling. So once that happened and I felt this love, I gazed over to my right, and in the distance there was a little white like speck, and it wanted me to come to it, and I wanted to go to it. So I started moving in that direction. It was like whatever I felt, something, like it happened. It happened,
Mm.
like there was no resistance. It was a field of non-resistance. And I went towards it, and as I went towards it, it got wider. The opening got bigger and bigger, and it was like a cloudy white, and there were shadow beings there. And in the very front was a shadow being of a little boy, and he needed my help. And there were adults behind him, shadow beings. And I wanted to help him, so I went that way. And I went into the opening, and I went kind of off to my right a little bit, and then the shadow beings sort of fanned out around me, and I was looking for the little boy. I didn't see him, and I was like curious about where he went. And then I felt that all the shadow beings, all these beings needed my help. So I felt, yes, I want to help you. And so they started to dart at me and dart away, dart at me and dart away, like almost like one by one from all directions. And I felt like I was diminishing. My energy was being taken. And
Mm.
I was like, well, no, I don't want that to happen. And as soon as I felt that, I was pulled out of there back into the dense, dark particle space. And I was moving, it was to the right. I moved through a less like distinct opening, but roundish, and went through that and into this beautiful landscape of gorgeous yellow flowers, like a huge field of yellow flowers and green rolling hills and trees that were dotted on the hills, and a blue sky and a dark green evergreen forest on my right, and a rock waterfall covered with like moss. The rocks had moss on them to my left, and it was just completely gorgeous. And as I came through that opening, I just immediately merged with all of it. So I was like the rocks and the hills and the flowers and the
So there was no
trees.
separation of who you were and what was around you. It was a feeling of
Mm-mm.
oneness in that space.
Oneness. Yeah, complete blissful oneness. And it was perfect. And then and of course I'm like blissed out, like just, oh, this is like amazing, like perfect. And I was flanked on both sides at that point by these really tall, thin, beige beings. And they were like kind of drapey, and they didn't have faces. And we were communicating through feeling, and they communicated to me. Like I felt their presence and I felt their support. And they felt to me, it was like unconditional love. Like, we are here for you, completely wholly. And so you can either stay here, you can go to what comes next beyond this, or you can go back. And I didn't know what came after this space I was in. The space was perfect. I could have existed there eternally. And And I didn't recall being a human. I didn't recall having a human life and all that. I didn't have any recollection or understanding of what human was. And yet I chose to come back, whatever that was.
Interesting.
So immediately, as soon as I felt that, like, I want to go back, I started moving backwards, and they turned into the opening that was like I was getting further and further away from it. And they communicated, if you go back, you need to share what you learned here. And I said, I felt back, okay. And then the next thing I knew, I was back in the body, and I felt pain in my chest. And I heard like a song. And later I found out some friends had put headphones on me, playing a song that they knew that I knew. And they were trying to bring me back to myself, because they were starting to wake me up. They had induced a coma. So this was like the next day after I had died for 8 minutes. The next day, they had extubated me because I had been intubated on a respirator in the ICU for 36 hours in a medically induced coma to recover from having an amniotic fluid embolism, which caused my lung blood vessels to clog where I couldn't perfuse oxygen. And that made my heart stop. So I was without any vital signs for 8 minutes. They had to stop compressions for 2 minutes to deliver my daughter.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what I saw. Like, when I had left my body and I was looking down, the doctor, my OB, had responded to the code blue. His partner showed up when he was getting ready to close me from the C-section, the emergency C-section, but he was trying to stop the bleeding because I had started to bleed out everywhere. And so I saw what was in the blue towel was my daughter being handed to her nurse anesthetist at my shoulder. She turned around. Maggie she had an APGAR score of 1. She had a heart rate of 60, and that was it.
Okay. And what does an APGAR score mean?
So an APGAR is given to every infant that's born, and it's 1 to 10. 10's the best. You want 10. 1 is like, she was very close to death. So they delivered her like just in time.
Oh, wow.
They brought her around, resuscitated her, brought her around, and then they ultimately transferred her to another hospital in town because the one I was at didn't have a neonatal ICU and she needed that.
Mm-hmm.
So they took her away, and then they started to do CPR on me again, and they got vital signs. It was probably 4 or 6 minutes. I don't really know how long they were working on me. I don't really remember either from the records, but none of that even mattered to me. It's so funny. So I woke up in the ICU. They didn't know if I was going to have brain damage. They didn't know how severe. They prepared my family for the fact that I may require 24-hour care for the rest of my life. So it was pretty scary there for everybody.
Oh my gosh,
Everybody
I can
else,
imagine.
but not for me. Like, for me, I was good. I was like not traumatized. And so when the doctors came in, it was about 5 days after. They had moved me out of the ICU 2 days after her birth into a private room, and I stayed there for another 3 days or so. And when I was coherent enough where I could have a conversation of some sort, the doctors came in and talked to me about what happened. And I can remember sitting there, listening to them, not getting it, and just listening and just going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I turned to he's now my ex-husband, but I turned to my husband at the time and I said, but I'm okay now. Like, what's the fuss? Like,
Oh,
what's the big deal?
wow. And they're like delivering this hard information to you, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm good, you guys.
Yeah, no worries.
Wow.
So, but I was blissed out still.
Okay, so you came back with
that.
this. Oh, you did. Okay, so
Yeah,
you came back with that bliss, that emotion, and almost this knowing, like, I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah, everything's good.
If I was gonna die, I would have. I'm back.
Yeah, and I didn't have the recall of my experience yet. I had like the after effects
Okay.
of NDE. So I thought everyone knew what I was thinking and feeling, so I didn't have to talk. Like that was my understanding. So sat there in my hospital bed with like my family. I had my brothers, my cousins, my ex-husband's family, everybody was there. And I'm just hanging out, like thinking they all know what I'm thinking. So I don't need to.
Fascinating.
And
Wow.
it's on video, like I'm looking around and I'm like, like smiling and laughing and like responding, but not conversating really. I had a lot of short-term memory loss, especially in the first like week. And then that very gradually got better. But the recall of my NDE came one night during sleep where I had the entire experience. Like it was, that part was traumatic because here I'm back in my life and I'm different. My family's hoping that the old Krista comes back someday, but I probably looked stoned all the time because I was just like, like everything was like cool. Everything, and before that I was like type A, like anxious, very like everything needs to be ready for the baby. And I was a PA. Like I had graduated, I'd taken my boards, passed my boards. I had a job lined up. I was all ready to go. And I was so psyched about being a PA. And then here this happens and I'm like, PA? I don't really, it's fine, I guess.
This is so interesting to me, Krista, because so you come back and you don't actually have knowledge right away of what all occurred and what all happened, but you're having these after effects where you just feel totally blissed out, feel like everything's going to be okay, feel like people should just know what you're thinking and feeling because that's how where you just came from. That's what it was like.
Yep.
And so you're just chill. All the while, you just gave birth for the first time. You just become a new mom. So in my mind, I'm just like, what? That's like one of the craziest life experiences. It's such a huge shift. It's such a huge learning curve. And it's another one of those things that you can't explain to people until you go through it.
Hmm.
So here you are postpartum. And
Hmm.
then you said it was a few weeks later that you're having a dream and the memories come flooding back to you of what happened.
Yeah. Well, it was, I don't have the exact time frame. It was probably like 6 or 8 weeks, maybe less, maybe 4. But what I found was that as I was recovering, as my brain was recovering from the lack of oxygen, I would wake up some mornings and I would feel like a layer of onion had been peeled. Like I felt more like the old Krista. It was weird. It was like, and it made me sad because I was just so in such bliss and I just knew how to take care of Maggie like instinctually. I just knew what to do. My mother stayed for a couple weeks and she watched me and she's like, I stood back and I let you do everything. And she's like, and you were doing fine. Like I had to kind of get in there so I could have some time with her, and change her diaper. But you were like right there. I was responsive to everything she needed. I was like, she must be hungry. And I'd go and I'd fix the bottle. And in the meantime, I couldn't remember how to get to the store down the street. It was like, it's
It was
insane.
all intuition, the brain
Such
stuff, the human
intuition.
stuff. You're like, see ya, but
Yeah,
just
like secondary. Yeah, the
that is so
intuition,
cool.
especially a woman's intuition is so powerful. It's like our superpower.
Yeah.
Um, so that carried on for a little bit. And then when I had this, it was more real than me talking to you than life as we go about our lives. It was more hyper, hyper real. It was like, that's the reality. This is the dream. And so I had this recall and I was beside myself when I woke up. I yelled for my husband at the time and he came in and I was like, you oh my God. And I told him like the whole thing. And he's sitting there and he's like, I'm just so glad you're okay. Like, I'm just so glad you're here. And I'm like, but this experience, like the love, oh my God. And how do I be the love? And how do I be that here? But I told him I would, and I know I have to be. And so that was my starting point on that morning of this long journey back to myself through, years and years of trying to carry on in the best way I could in the old life that I had as the new person that I was. So it was like this constant sort of push and pull and ego battle and no ego. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. And so I reached out to Dr. Jeff Long, who is a radiation oncologist, and he was a physician. And I'm like, at the time I reached out, I was searching. I was like, I needed validation because my science brain came in and said, no, that didn't happen. But every part of my being knew that it did. And I'm like, how do I gotta figure this out. So I reached out to him and he emailed me back. Dr. Jeff Long, he is a researcher for NDEs. Him and his wife, Jody, run the Near Death Experience Research Foundation,
Okay.
NDERF. It's a collection of thousands and thousands of NDEs. So I found this, because of course I got online, and this was in 2000. So we had this big desktop computer, and there wasn't a lot out there. But I found him and I found his website and I read some of the things, and I was crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what do I do? And so he emailed me back and he said, here's IANS, International Association of Near Death Studies.org. Here's their information. There's ASSIST, which is for spiritual experiencers, like people who've had profound spiritual experiences and need support. Gave me that information and said, and pay attention to your dreams. And I was like, oh, that's all the validation I needed at that time, because I needed more later. But because
Mm.
the ego likes to say, no, just stay in your normal life. Like that's so much easier.
Because at this time, every single day, it's almost like peeling back the layers where you're becoming more and more and more like the old self. Like you're becoming
Yeah.
more Krista, the human being, the personality, the one who was experiencing life before the NDE. And yet you have recollection, you know what happened, you know what you saw. Is there a bit of like longing for, oh, I want to keep that part of me intact?
Hmm. Oh, very much so. Very much so. My challenge was bringing that here to this existence,
Mm-hmm.
bringing that, like embodying it. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to embody it. Like I didn't have the tools or a roadmap or a guide or a blueprint to tell me, do this, this, and this, and you can be that
Mm-hmm.
perfect love. And so I struggled. I struggled. I was a new PA. I had a job lined up. I was a new mother. I was a wife. And I was overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed.
I can
And
imagine.
I just tried, like, just me getting up and taking care of my daughter each day was enough. Like, and I'm recovering too from a severe brain injury and body trauma. Cardiac arrest is no joke. Looking back, I appreciate it now, especially as a PA, and I worked in emergency medicine for years. Understanding it from a medical standpoint, like I used to minimize it all the time, like constantly. I'd minimize it. And that's because my experience of it was so beautiful, but recovering from it was quite difficult. I never fully recovered, but I did get to work in my profession for 25 years.
Okay.
So I am grateful for that. But at the same time, I didn't really want to be a PA anymore. I had lost that passion.
Mhm.
Um, so I sort of forced myself to stay and to, earn a living
Mhm.
and be part of the matrix.
Yeah.
And I agree to that, right? So,
It's hard to describe for people who haven't maybe necessarily gone through a spiritual experience like that, but there is these
yeah.
moments of what is the point? What am I doing this for? I don't want to live out this little, that's not as exciting or as interesting or what. Like, that's not who I actually am. And so you
Mhm.
have this integration process. And for
Mhm.
you, it's like you're physically healing. You've become a new mom. You're trying to make sense of everything you experience. Like, I honestly just can't even imagine what you're going through.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if we can take it back a little bit to the experience because I have so many questions
Yeah, please.
about what you saw on the other side.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate how you share the story because you're very much sharing what happened, what you saw, what you experienced without the interpretation. But I'm so curious, what is your interpretation? So the first thing that you see was almost feels like dimensions, like you're flying through almost like a dimension of that white light and then the black particle light, and then you're flown over here. Does that word resonate with you, or what have you reflected on afterwards that maybe that was?
The word that always comes to me is a realm. It was like a realm of existence. It was, some people call it levels, vibrational, levels. And that resonates too, but not wholly, not completely. So it was like another realm, like walking through the door and you go outside and it's a different view. It was sort of like that. So the interesting piece to it was that I came to understand, the energies involved, because there was love energy and I was energy. I was literally like particulate energy. And the only one of the five senses I had was sight, and communication was clairsentience, like feeling. So emotions, which are energy in the body, energy outside of us, and law of attraction. So, but I didn't know the name of law of attraction at the time. I found out about that later, like 10 years later, when I was talking with a friend of mine and she was talking about Esther and Jerry Hicks and Abraham. And I was like, well, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's a law of attraction. I'm like, well, what's that? And so she, was explaining it to me and I'm like, that's brilliant. How did I never learn about this? Like, of course, we create our reality.
Mhm.
We are magnets for energy.
And for those people who don't know what the law of attraction is, from my understanding, like it's simply that which is likened to itself is drawn. So,
Mhm.
like energy attracts like energy.
Right.
So, you're learning about this years later, and there's almost this resonance when you're learning about it of ding, ding, ding. I experienced that firsthand.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
did you experience that during your NDE?
Well, when I moved around the room, it was like I felt I want to go over here, and I went there. When I was back in the dense particles like I was, and then there was that feeling of wanting to help over in the distance. And when I felt that, I started moving that way. And it was just like instantaneous. When I wanted to leave the realm with the shadow beings, I was pulled out of there by the universe. So my NDE was created by me and co-created with the universe. Every NDE, it's my understanding, every NDE is for that individual, no one else. And that's why they're all so different. But yet there's those elements that are the same,
Mhm.
right? But for me, I'm the scientist. So what am I? I'm particles. you know, I wasn't part of a religion. I'm not part. I'm all religions, everything. I'm all encompassing. Love is love. But some people who believe in Christian or Catholic or Muslim or whatever, they have their experience that sometimes is directly reflective of that. So for me, it was like energy, and it was love and the law of attraction were the two dominant energies in my NDE, and they were the driving forces of everything that
Mhm.
happened.
I think it's really interesting how you say is unique to you, which makes so much sense. And I have
Mhm.
heard that from other NDEers and why it's different of what you see exactly when you cross over, who you see, who comes to you, the scene that's set. It's a perfect experience tailored just for you.
Yeah.
That is so unique, but it's also very similar. It's like all NDEers kind of say that. And then the instantaneous creation of it, the ask you shall receive, the, oh, I had this thought, or I had this question, or I had this curiosity, and bam, it came to me. That's super similar across near death experiences. So that's super fascinating. So seeing different realms, I like that. Have you done any reflecting on the shadowy figures when you saw
Mhm.
that little boy and then you saw those shadowy figures who all wanted help from you, and then it seemed like it was starting to deplete your energy? What was that?
So that was me sort of checking in with myself. In my life up to that point, I had always been a person that was a helper. And I got my undergrad in psychology. I worked in mental health. I worked with kids. I worked with adolescents. I worked with adults.
Mm,
And I'm a giver. So very often, people who, especially females, give, and there's no replenishment. There's no taking. And from my path, from that point forward, I would be required to be in a role where I would be the giver. And repeatedly throughout the day, sometimes 40 patients a day, I was taking care of. And that takes a lot of energy. So, was I going to be able to choose myself above giving away my energy to
mhm,
everybody?
mhm,
That's such a huge life lesson in one little scenario in my NDE. And I understood it later. Once I began to really integrate my NDE years later, I understood it. But even then, sometimes lessons don't solidify right away.
mhm,
So, yes, I understood it up here, but did I learn the lesson? No. And not for years did I
mhm,
learn that lesson. And there's days where I still am not learning the lesson. Like I'm
mhm,
still back into like, oh, I'm giving myself more than, even though I need to be filled up.
mhm.
But it was key for me to really understand that choosing myself first is not selfish. Actually, it goes in line too with like what Esther and Jerry Hicks talked about. It's not selfish to put yourself first. You must put yourself first. Otherwise, you can't give from an empty cup,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
So,
You got to put your own oxygen mask on first before
yeah,
helping
exactly.
other
That whole,
people.
yep.
But it's so cool that you saw that visual so clearly of, I just have this want and this desire to help people. And it comes from probably such a genuine, loving place, but at what cost and at what detriment? And so, how can I be more conscious of the energy that I'm bringing and make sure that I'm pouring into myself first so that I can pour from that overflowing cup?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I want to say this too because I've met one other person in my life who said this, and I'm like, yes, we're the same. We were in a group, and he's like, I came to this body as a we. Like, I'm David, but I am all of you and everyone. And that's exactly right. And I realized, I'm like, ever since I was small, I always wondered why people behaved like other people didn't matter. I didn't understand that. And I too, like I came in as a we, and the human word for it is empath, feeling other people. So that energy of connection with other humans, other like animals, nature, everything, it was innate in me already. So hence the reason why it's harder to choose, the self over the group at points, but also the connection with nature. It's like this seamless flow that I experience. And I was like that when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Um, it's so interesting how the NDE reflected me holistically.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Like that first scene when you're with the shadowy figures, there's this almost separation. It's like them, the little boy, the shadowy figures, and me. But then I was thinking when you went to that next realm where you're in nature and it's so beautiful, and you said, I felt connected to all of it. So
Hmm.
there was a significant shift of separation to oneness from one
Yeah.
realm to the next.
Yeah. Well, in the shadow beings too, I could feel them. Like they needed my help. I didn't have a sense of what for, like for what purpose at that time, but my instinct and my inclination was, yes, I'll help you. And then once it was to the detriment of me, then I chose me.
In the serene realm, you then on either side of you had these beings who you call your guides. Do you think that those guides are with you at all times?
On some level, yes. I don't have a sense of them in my day-to-day consciousness being in my life. I have others that are around that I can sense.
Mm.
But the feeling, the unconditional love, I was familiar with that because when I was about 3 or 4, I had a visitation from an entity, and I felt that unconditional love from them. And I couldn't see them, which was odd to me, like, it confused me, but they communicated that, I had their unconditional love always. They would always be with me, and I would wish for them when I was feeling lonely. I remember distinctly dancing in our den, and my mom wasn't there, and I wanted somebody to watch me dance, and I wished for my friend, and they showed up, and they were up in the corner, and they showed up, and they watched me dance. So I
Oh.
wasn't by myself, and I remember wishing for them the last time, and it was a half-hearted wish. I was like, "Let's just see if they'll appear," and they didn't the first time I felt it, and then the second time, they showed up, and they were, like, right next to me, and they moved into my center of my chest, and they're like, "You don't need me anymore. I'm always here. You don't need me anymore."
Mm.
And it was true because it was like, I just wanted to see if they'd show up, I didn't really need them. And I understood that to be Archangel Michael. So Michael was there when I was like a lonely child. I wasn't, my parents took very good care of me, and I had brothers, but I had an older brother and a younger brother, and I was the only girl. And my mom was pregnant with my brother when I was this age that this happened. So she was probably taking a nap or something, like I spent time by myself a lot, and I would get lonely. So, the archangels are around us always, and all we have to do is wish for them, think of them, ask for them to give us assistance or guidance or whatever.
Mm.
And they're there. They're there in an instant.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, like you experienced on the other side, as soon as you wanted something, as soon as you set that intention out, it happened instantaneously. So
Right.
that's very cool. Okay, one other a huge experience that you had in your near-death experience was feeling like any question you had ever had, the answer, it just all you saw almost this visual of a funnel, and then at the very bottom of it, it just all boiled down to love.
Mhm.
Were there any specific questions that you consciously remember asking? Because we've all heard all there is love, right? And sometimes that can feel very pie in the sky, very okay, cool. But when you're actually going through hardship or difficult, challenging times, it's hard to see sometimes where love is the answer, where love falls in the experience that you're currently having. So I'm so curious on a practical level what you saw that meant.
Yeah. It's I mean, this is such a good point because especially in this upside down world that seemingly upside down that we live in, where common sense is inverted and things are like, huh? It's challenging to stay in a space of love and to view things as all for the greater good. But what I learned, and again, a spiritual practitioner will spend a lot of time getting to the point where they actually can feel and practice a loving state of being at all times. And well, I don't know anybody that can at all times, but because we live in a dual world, and we chose
Mhm.
to come here, and we wanted to experience this duality, and all we can do to the best of our ability is to intend love, is to open our lens to the wide angle and view things with a broader view, a more loving view. It doesn't mean to bury our head in the sand and pretend like bad things don't happen, because again, we live in a physical realm where we are physical beings. And although ultimately there's so much empty space between the atoms of our body, there's more empty space than there is solid stuff, right? But we're having this human experience, and we, to the best of our ability, as much as we can intend love and see love, then the better time we're going to have, basically. I mean, that's like the most basic way to put it. But all this stuff that we're seeing that's supposedly happening in the world, supposedly what they're telling us on television is truth, which I hold the position of most of it isn't. So I don't watch it. And that I live based on intuition and critical thinking, seeing the broader picture, looking through all the noise and seeing what's actually happening. And sometimes we can't see that, and we're not meant to right now. But we just have to trust that ultimately it's all for the greater good. Everything that we experience here ultimately is for the greater good. So that's probably the best way that I can answer that.
Mhm.
I created 12 principles for daily living, I call them, and
Yes.
and it's my NDE. It's like when I'm practicing all these points of states of being that are the 12 principles, like I'm in flow, I'm in just like this wonderful place energetically where time sort of falls away and problems don't exist, and I'm just being. I'm just doing my thing.
Mhm.
And it's great.
There's so many moments where, I'll be online and seeing what's going on, and I just have this quiet, intuitive voice that just says, "Put your phone down. Go outside. Go spend time with your family. Go call your mom. Go for a walk in nature. Like, get
Mhm.
back to the basics."
Mhm.
Because it can seem so chaotic, and it can be so easy to get all wrapped up in the dramas of the world and the chaos and all of that. But then when you really take it back to your own life and the simplicity, you realize, oh my gosh, there's beauty everywhere. So I think that's really, really beautiful. And also, I think something else that we really outline in this podcast oftentimes is things seem so awful or things seem so traumatic, but it's the difficult challenges that people go through that ultimately help them grow and evolve. And there's so much beauty that can come of it too. So sometimes when we're looking at the challenge head on, or we're looking at the mess face on, it can seem really messy and it can seem really awful, but we don't know where it's ultimately going. So
Right.
it's a good reminder. And that's kind of, it sounds like, where it all funnels down to love and kind of trusting in that there
Yes.
is love present. And
Mhm.
sometimes we're the love that needs to be
We are.
present.
Mhm.
Yeah, most times, from sure. You talked about your 12 principles, which are in your book that you wrote, I Died and Learned How to Live. What a perfect title for a book. So the 12 principles are what you learned during your NDE.
Yeah, because my NDE was all about feeling, and it was hard for me to talk about my NDE using human words. So I wanted to write down my story, and this is like 10 years later. I was starting to process it. And so I wanted to write it down, and I thought, well, I'll put it in a book and I'll give a little bit of backstory. And then I'm like, my life is improving because it had become very challenging at one point. And I knew the key was for me to process my NDE and learn how to be that love. Once I learned how to be that love, I knew my life would get better. And it did. So I started meditating, and a little while after I started meditating, I started to journal after I meditated. And so I would journal just whatever came to me. And I would, at points, there was like not a lot to say. Just so I'm like, well, let me sum it up in an emotion, like a feeling. And so I would write it down. And then some months later was reflecting on the pages that I had written in my journal. And I was like, oh, there's these words. So I took them all, I wrote them all down like on one piece of paper. And I looked at them, I'm like, these are states of being. And
What are some of the examples of the words?
yeah, so the 12 principles: live lovingly, live willingly, live compassionately, courageously,
Mm.
purposefully, miraculously. So I started to practice these in my daily life along with the law of attraction, and also trying to be like lovingly detached, because that was the love that was in my NDE. It was like this detached, free love, just freeing love. It made me feel free but completely supported. And that's the healthiest kind of love to be in. And
And when you say loving detachment, is that giving love without an attachment of what needs to be on the other end of it or what you're receiving or what's going to happen? It's just that loving and trust?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. No, you summed it up perfectly. It's like, it's just a free love. It frees you, you know? Yeah, without having an expectation, without having conditions attached, because unconditional love is what we are in our essence. So that's the purest form of communication with another being, is unconditional love. You like to think about what your pet gives you, your dog, usually not cats so much, but your pet, it's like
Sometimes your cats.
sometimes your cats do if they're cuddly and sweet. But like your dog is just loves you unconditionally, and they don't expect anything from you in return. So it's that, and it's the lack of ego attachment that is key, really. So in being unconditionally loving, it's a really good diminishment of ego practice, because ego drives so much in this world, and those egoless moments can sometimes seem like they're few and far between. But when we can spend time in that egoless state, then the love it just flows, and it's so easy. And that's the connector. That's like the deep connector between us in our lives, our relationships. And anything that tries to get in the way of that is something that I personally have chosen to move away from in my life.
Mhm,
So it gets
mhm,
makes things very simple.
mhm. I think it's really cool, Krista, that you started to write your book because you I think it's really relatable that you go through this very, very significant life-changing thing. It sounds like the integration process was quite difficult. We just scratched the surface. We haven't even
Yeah.
gotten to all of it. So if there's anything else you
Yeah.
want to touch on, which might be helpful for people, I'd love to get there too. But life was difficult afterwards. And I think
Mhm.
that's really important because I know people personally, I've gone through it myself, where you have this life altering moment. And that's what this whole podcast is about. But your human life doesn't just shift. You're not this enlightened person. You're not this Jesus person. You're still this human being who, yes,
Right.
has had this incredible wisdom and these messages, but integrating it into your life and taking it from knowledge and what you see to actually living it day to day is integrating. It's a practice, it's a daily practice. And so I love how you kind of got to this moment. Was there a specific moment where you just said, I got to integrate this? Like what I experienced was so profound, but I need to be living this on a day to day, which in turn, it sounds like motivated you to put pen to paper and write down the 12 principles.
Yeah, the catalyst really was my ex-husband became very ill, and our daughter started to suffer as well. And she was at that tender age of like 10, 11 years old. And, Maggie, motherhood was everything. to me. And this is going to make me a little like being a mom was, I just wanted to be a mom and I wanted to be a PA and, of course, a wife. But after she was born and I had, no recall of my PA training, I no longer really wanted to be a PA anymore. I just wanted to be a mom. And I wanted to be with her 24/7 and every day of her life, and not in an unhealthy way. Just like she was just everything, she was just the most perfect little being. And I had such an appreciation for her, you know. So when I saw her suffering, that was really like, okay. Like my husband being ill, okay. Like he's an adult and he was a traveling musician and he hadn't been very kind to his body. So I was like, okay, that's on you. I'm going to help take care of you, but my daughter needs me and she needs a mom who is whole. And I didn't feel whole. So I went on a quest and I knew that integrating my NDE would help make me whole. And so that was all I was about. And I had spent years, 2 solid years, focusing on completely revamping my internal environment. And when I did that, my external environment started to match. And I was in the midst of working in a very busy emergency room in Southwest Florida. And I was in that, 12 hours a shift. So that was my practice ground. And I transformed. I transformed, like, I did a 180, really.
What do you mean the hospital was your practice ground?
Oh. So an emergency room as a PA, you're not a doctor and you're not a nurse. And so my role was very varied. Some, other providers, physicians, nurses even would assume I was doing the doctor's role, playing the doctor's role, whatever. And then the nurses were like, well, you need to help me too. So there was a lot of pressure, a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
to be done. We're always short staffed. A lot of egos, a lot of personalities, and it's a lot of noise, a lot of just chaos
Okay.
sometimes.
Right.
People talking, people yelling, demands placed on you constantly, interruptions constantly. So to have a sense of peace in the midst of that chaos was my goal. So I was like, okay, I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice loving detachment. I'm going to practice the law of attraction. I would write affirmations down and put them in my scrub top pocket, go into the bathroom when I had a second, and I would stand in the mirror and read them to myself and reset, refocus, because bad stuff happened. And I would just have to carry on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not normal. The emergency room is not a normal environment to exist in. So I had to remind myself constantly, like, this is not normal. Like, all of this is not normal. And then I was able to adopt sort of this lightness in all of it. Like, I would be joking around. I love to joke around. I would be joking around with my patients and the nurses and the doc. Like, I would talk to some very difficult people on the phone, consultations and stuff. And those became so much easier. And we would get a yearly review. I was there for over 8 years. We would get a yearly review. And the last 3 or 4 years I was there, it was always Krista brings a sense of calm to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And we love working with Krista because she's this or that. It was
Yeah.
really wonderful to hear. And I wasn't like all, my husband, he's British. He would be like, I wasn't all chuffed about it. It wasn't about ego stroking. It was just about validation and confirmation that I was doing the work and I was doing something for myself that only I could do for myself. And I had transformed.
Oh
And
my gosh. Krista, this is huge. This is such a big learning moment for me and for anybody who's listening. I totally understand what you're saying when you say it was your training ground, because it's like, if I can bring peace to this, if
yeah,
I can be in the midst of these egos and this chaos and these very stressful, I'm sure, situations and the ups and the downs, like if I can bring love and I can bring peace, which again, is a practice. Like, it doesn't just come naturally. If we check out, it's so easy to get caught up in the chaos and be a part of the chaos. But when you are staying present and staying conscious and you have that practice every day where you're like, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to implement what I learned,
Hmm.
then you can be the calm in the storm. You can be the peace. You can be the pillar where people are just like, that woman's a godsend. If she wasn't in the, and I've experienced nurses like that. I've experienced people where you're just like, if that person wasn't there, I would have had a completely different experience. But love is contagious. Peace is contagious. Confidence and just that solid kind of grounded, rooted energy is contagious for people around you. And so anyone listening, you might work in a stressful career. You might be going through your own chaos right now in your family or in your work or whatever it is in your life. And maybe this is your training ground. Maybe
Hmm.
this is the opportunity where we take what we know spiritually, the spiritual knowledge that we've learned from all the books and the seminars or our own personal experience, and we say, okay, time to integrate it. And this is the perfect life experience. This is the perfect training ground for me to implement.
Yep. 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 Beautifully
Cool.
said. Yes.
Cool. My wheels are turning for my own life. So I'm
Oh,
like,
yay.
cool. I love this. So this is my training ground. I'm going to implement this. And so you're writing the book as you're going along, or how does the book come
Yeah.
to you?
The book was fairly easy in terms of inspiration because I had my NDE that I did. I actually didn't even include my NDE, the first draft. I'd only put in the 12 principles.
Mm.
And then I'm like, oh, I should probably include my NDE.
Yep.
So I put it at the front of the book. And then I go on to discuss the 12 principles. So I just wrote it and I self published it. And I shared it at the very first International Association of Near-Death Studies conference I went to in Newport Beach in California in 2014. And I brought my daughter with me. And I brought my book there and I left some copies in the bookstore. And in 2016, I got a spontaneous email. And it was the research person for Morgan Freeman's show, Story of God, they were producing at the time. I don't think they had aired any episodes yet. And she wanted to talk to me. She saw my book and she's like, I wasn't going to buy a book, but I bought your book. And I loved it. So they told the research person about me when they were looking for a person who had an NDE through the Seattle IANS group. So she reached out and I ended up going on that show with my daughter. So we were on the second season's first or second episode, Heaven and Hell. Yeah, we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico to be interviewed by Morgan Freeman.
What a cool experience. How was being interviewed by Morgan Freeman?
It was crazy. Like, it was surreal. I was really nervous, but it was amazing. Like, he was like larger than life in terms
Mm.
of his intensity. He's a big man, tall, but he was very sweet, and he was very sweet to my daughter, and he was very interested. We had a cool conversation off camera as they were adjusting the camera angles. And the producer actually came over and asked us to stop talking because he wanted to catch it all.
Right. Yep.
Because we were talking about, Morgan asked me what I thought of evil, the reason for evil. And I said, well, without it, we wouldn't know what love was. So we need it to know the difference because otherwise we wouldn't. And the best we can do is intend love as opposed to evil. But it has to be here for us to grow as humans. And he sort of looked off and he felt a little troubled to me. But I do understand that his stepdaughter had been violently killed by her boyfriend not that long before this interview. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I think the winter before. So it felt like he was searching for answers for himself. But it was pretty phenomenal, and that was an experience that I'll never forget.
Mm. And it speaks to the power of your story, right? Because
Yeah.
it's so impactful that they wanted to feature it on their show, which is so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Krista, bringing it back to your 12 principles, of all of the principles in your book that you write about, which one was the hardest to actively live once you were back in your body?
Patiently. Live
Patience?
patiently. Yeah, and that one I feel like I've come a long way since then.
Mm,
But at that time, yeah, it was really challenging for me to be patient and trust. Part of that being patient is trusting in the processes of life,
mm-hmm,
the natural flow, while intending what it is you want,
mm-hmm,
you know,
mm-hmm.
because we get to do that.
Yeah. We're like, no, I want this thing now. But sometimes source, God, the universe is like, no, but this is going to happen first. And this happens first. And then we'll get there. But
Right.
there's a natural unfolding and a flow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Krista, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any other part of your experience or learning that you want to impart and share? Like, if there was one thing that people can take away from what you experienced more on a practical level, on a day-to-day practice level,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Mm. I would have to say, trust yourself. Your intuition, your knowing about things, those little niggles, those little, oh, maybe I should kind of thing, that's your body's energy giving you information. And you can choose to listen to it or not. And there's no wrong in either. But that is the most informed, most intelligent form of information, affirmation that you need to do the next right thing for yourself. And that's such a challenging thing to learn how to do, is to listen to ourselves. But for me, that's been the most helpful tool in living day to day and making decisions from day to day, big ones and little ones.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful answer. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
You're so
And
welcome.
Krista, if people wanted to connect with you, how can they find you? How can they find your book to learn more about the principles?
So my book's on Amazon. I Died and Learned How to Live. And I have a YouTube channel, and it's at Krista Gorman. And then my email is 12principles at Gmail. Feel free to send me an email if you would like to. But yeah, those are the places that you can reach me.
Wonderful. We'll have it all linked in the show notes. Krista, thank you so much for sharing your story and speaking so publicly about it and coming on the podcast. I am so, so grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Meant to Be Heard. If this episode resonated, please share it with a friend, rate the podcast, and hit follow so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at You're Meant to Be Here with a 2. New episodes drop Mondays. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you're meant to be here.